We're here out on the farm again. Welcome, Terry. We're here to talk about cover crops again. I'm Dawn Madison on behalf of the Rock County Planning Group. Here again talking to Terry Aukes. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. I met you about 2015, 2016 on some waterway projects. Back then you were rotational no-till. Why don't you go ahead and tell me about your farm operation and a little bit about your journey.
Thank you, Dawn. So I started farming back in 1999 with my father and two brothers. We worked with no-till, particularly in the soybean rotation, for about 30 years now in our farm family. But really how we got started with cover crops were when we're in that no-till situation, the benefits of soil erosion and keeping soil in place and just less gully erosion was really the biggest reason from a no-till standpoint. And as we learned more and more about cover crops, started to hear about the benefits and wanted to see some of that for ourselves. And really what pushed us over the edge is approximately 10 years ago, there was a farm that my brother and I installed 7,000 feet of farmable terraces, and it had a fair amount of compaction from the bulldozer putting it in. And so we had heard that cover crops help alleviate some compaction. So we decided to seed a multi-species mix into that under an EQIP program. And that's really what kind of pushed us over the edge. After 3 years, we start to see a benefit, better water filtration, some weed suppression, and obviously again less erosion, because obviously with the terraces, it slopes 6 to 9%, so it has pretty steep slope. And we just saw some benefits from not having water erode the soil. And so then we started looking at it and saying, okay, can we look at moving cover crops to other farms that we might have sensitive areas or issues to? And again, that was approximately 10 years ago, and continue to build on that to the point where we're trying to get virtually at least 75% covers on our farms that we farm, if not 100%.
And what rates have you gone to and mix have you gone to now?
Originally was cereal rye was the first, just a single cereal rye application, and it was aerial applied in the standing corn, no-tilled in the soybean stubble when in a field of soybeans. As we've continued to use cover crops, we've added tillage radish, purple top turnips, and then crimson clover. Rye does the heavy lifting and does most of the work, but we really like on certain years, depending on moisture in the fall and the length of the growing season, really like adding the tillage radish in there as well. Typical rates from an aerial application standpoint, I try to keep the total mix around 80 pounds, just from an aerial application cost standpoint, because anything more than that, then it gets kind of expensive from an application, but typically about 65 pounds, 70 pounds of cereal rye, 2 to 3 pounds of tillage radish, somewhere around 2 pounds of crimson clover, and around 2 to 3 pounds of turnips. And you can play with some of those seeding rates a little bit. And that's from an aerial application standpoint, which is generally tends to be a little bit higher than drilling it, because you have some seed hanging up in the corn leaves and whatnot, and it's laying on top. When we're drilling, we can drop that cereal rate down by a third approximately, and I generally don't really adjust the brassicas. I generally leave them alone, because 1 to 2 pounds of each is not really a large deal one way or the other to drop.
You use both aerial and you do some drilling, but I know you do an extensive amount of aerial application.
Correct. So most of our cover crop is aerial applied, particularly in the standing corn, just for several reasons. Number one, I like to apply it in mid to third week of August, because it just gets the seed on another month earlier than drilling it. And generally late August, nights start cooling off, our chances of rain go up. And generally what I've seen is if we just get a half inch of rain, that's about what it takes to get it established. And then once the corn crop comes off, or the corn crop canopy starts opening up, it just starts to take off. Workload, busy, harvest is busy, trying to get the crop out in time, and then to have someone drilling. We've done it, and we'll still do some drilling, but my preferred method is aerial application. I think about Dawn the last 10 years that we've done it. For the most part, it's been very, very successful. A very dry fall can be difficult, there's no doubt, and we're trending that way now, so just setting expectations. But I've seen it where that seed lays there for a long period of time. Eventually we'll get a rain. We have to be optimistic and pray that it'll rain again, and if not, we've seen that seed germinate in the spring too with the snow melt, and you still get some benefit, obviously not as much as if it germinated in the fall.
In the spring, when you're terminating, what chemicals do you use to terminate?
That's a great question. Obviously, glyphosate is part of the plan to kill cereal rye. Generally, do not adjust our chemical program any different than if we were growing cover crop versus not. On our no-till burn down, we'll use dicamba, extend, I should say, glyphosate, and a product like Sonic or Authority First. Mare still can be an issue in no-till, and so that combination's been very strong. And then coming back with Roundup again and Extend, and that's it. That's a pretty standard program. Once in a while, if I have concerns, if we're spraying earlier than normal on that second application, we'll put a layered residual like a dual in. In the corn, that has taken some modification. So products like Sure Start, Chirpoflex are quite harsh on cover crops, and so they have long residual. They're good compounds, but if you're any consideration through any part of the growing season, those products should be avoided. The products that I've used are Harness, Dual, Outlook are very favorable. Callisto is very safe on the post-applied side. Obviously Roundup. Liberty's not residual, so if you had Smart Stacks corn, you could use Liberty. So there's a variety of things. Atrazine is one I would probably stay away from if you're thinking about utilizing brassicas. And then of course, if you're ever, I don't, but if you ever considered grazing from a standpoint, you have to look what's on the label and what's legal from a herbicide residual standpoint.
Can you give me some economic benefits, and additionally, beyond just the dollars and cents we can see physically, is there any economic benefits that we don't get to see that are hard to put a dollar to?
We've seen it where when we grid sample every 4 years, we're seeing that organic matter going up about 3 to 0.4% every 4 years. And so if you stick with it 10, 12 years, it's gone up over 1%. Yeah, put a price tag on that now, Dawn, and the environment what we're in is how dry as it is. And then not to mention the amount of extra available phosphorus and potassium and micronutrients, and nitrogen for that matter, that comes along with that percent organic matter. That's something that you don't see or may not always realize the benefit of. Our family, we try to fight erosion with a passion. It really do, just shy of breaking our heart to see. You see them gullies and see that soil erode. Once it's gone, it's gone. You can try to put a price tag on that because you can buy dump trucks of soil, but that's heartbreaking. So that in itself, we said in our family that even if we broke even from that standpoint, to eliminate that was our goal, but we see all these other benefits with it. Decreased chemical use. The field that we're sitting in, Dawn, as what as it was last year, I no-tilled soybeans into rye that was about 6 foot tall. Normally we would not do that, but that's what happens when it rains till middle of June. And I did a burn down on that about June 10, and I did not post-apply spray this field. And so from that standpoint, it was about $30 an acre herbicide savings that I was able to put in my pocket. And then lastly, some benefit that we started seeing years ago, and it's back to grid sampling again and knowing the trend and what's going on in your field, we started to see fertility go up. I did not expect to see that. I always thought the soil is a bank. You apply nutrients, you grow a crop, you draw the bank down, and you reapply nutrients. And to come to find out that cover crops unlock or unleash those tied up nutrients, whether they're bringing nutrients that are deeper in the soil profile to the surface, or you're decreasing wind and soil erosion where particles are leaving, or just supercharging the soil bacteria to make nutrients more available. So from that standpoint, I'll vary our fertility program year to year, and that can be different too. So there's some dollars that you can put in your pocket too.
Yeah, so you were saying you guesstimate the average cost. You tried to run a rule of number. What was that
budget
rule?
That I use is $30 It could, if you're aerial applying it and wanted to crowd on the higher end, $35 from a budget. I have played around with rates. I've taken, several years ago, I took an 80-acre parcel and did a 25-pound mix, a 50-pound mix, and a 75-pound mix. And I did 8 passes of each of those, and I monitored that with aerial imagery to see what kind of amount of cover, total cover I received. And you'll get some establishment with all 3 seeding rates, but by far the 75-pound rate, Dawn, was superior. And in my mind, going after weed suppression and cover for the money spent, I try to stay around that 75 pounds.
Let's go into the other side of Terry, which is the agronomist for CFE. You have an added benefit that some others don't, where you get to see this on a broader scale. Tell us about some of the trends you're seeing.
About, like I said, 10 years ago, it was virtually non-existent from that standpoint. There was a little bit of small grains that was put in the spring that growers would put in their 10, 20 acres that they'd want to haul manure in the summer, but from that extent, that was about it. What really jump-started it in northwest Iowa, there's a tremendous, obviously, a lot of livestock, Dawn, and a lot of silage comes off, and that soil lays bare a long time. And so there had been equip and incentives to drive growers to try that, and it took a while at first. I remember 10 years ago, it literally took 6 months to utilize the full amount of resources that the local NRCS had to implement cover crops. And now it's within days. And beyond that, what I think is a trend, every year it continues to grow. I see what our seed business does, that I can judge or gauge how many total acres that we sell in our territory, and we're not the only one that sells seed. And so I see where the total trend is moving continued covers. The one thing that I think, if you look back 7, 8, 9 years ago, if a farmer would put a cover crop in, neighbors would say, "What's going on? Why is he doing that?" They didn't truly understand it. I think in Northwest Iowa now, it's a culture that's created. It's just natural that there's enough growers that have done it and seen benefit that it's part of the total farm management decision, no different than you would put a herbicide on, that once that silage gets chopped, it's automatic. We're going to put the cover crop on to protect that soil. And then other added benefit is just financially, agriculture's been difficult the last 3 to 4 years. And growers, land, the ability to acquire land is difficult. And so growers are trying to make the maximum use of the land that they have. And so there's a lot of double cropping going on. And there's, whether you're putting winter rye in a mix in the fall and they chop it next spring, or they'll do that and they'll put like a variety of 7-way species in and they graze it next summer for cows. There's just a lot of different uses, but I've seen it where the seed genetics that we have today versus 20 years ago allow us the ability to look at more and more double crop, and that's really where the trend is. Livestock growers have really latched onto that.
So for those new producers that you're working with, what things are you telling them to guide them in their introductory steps into cover cropping?
I've had it where I've talked to some producers, and at first they might feel a little bit overwhelmed. I try to show them pictures of my operation just to make them feel more comfortable. What does it look like and how do you work with it? But my first question is, what do you want to accomplish and what's your goal? Is it more from a forage standpoint, or is it from a cover, decreasing erosion? And it could be both or all of the above. I try to explain the benefits, but I'm careful because the benefits I realize might not be fully realized on the same scale at the same timeline as me, but I at least try to set expectations from that standpoint. And I just challenge the grower, if you don't take a start, you'll never dive in. And if they feel comfortable, to split an 80 or try 80 acres or 40 of 80 acres and see what they do. Align with their agronomist to walk them through when to terminate it, when to plant into it, and again, the herbicide considerations too.
And what's the future hold for your cover cropping or no-till?
Since this field will be soybeans, My experience is it's very easy to work with it in soybeans, and so I'll let that cover crop grow as long as I possibly can. I've sprayed it the day I plant, the day after I plant, a week before I plant. It's very versatile, so I'm optimistic that if we can catch a half-inch of rain, even though it's dry, harvest is going to be earlier. The canopy is going to start to open up earlier too. So I've had years in the past, years like this, even though it's dry, we can get tremendous amount of cover in the fall because it is warm, and we have a longer fall because the crop is in that far in advance. I look forward to it from that standpoint, but in this field, allowing it to grow as long as I can and terminate it right ahead of planting.
For those producers that want to get in contact with you or stop out and see this, tell us where we're located and how they can do that.
So the field is located approximately, if you know where Manly gas station is at, it's 1 mile south of Manly and 2 1/4 east. And we're sitting on a bin site. There's 2 bin sites, and there's a little bit of a long driveway to the field to get to where we're sitting here, Dawn. Anyone's more than welcome to take a look or pop in if they choose to.
Your email address is also linked on the Rock County page, so if they just
Correct.
wanted to contact you via email, they could do it that way too.
That would be fine.
Well, thank you for sharing your plethora of information. I really appreciate this interview and look forward to seeing this end result.
All right, thank you,
Terry.
Dawn.
Yep.